Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I want to talk about the winner of the Governor General Award, which, if you don't know, here in Canada is quite prestigious. It might even be the most prestigious, though not as lucrative, prize to win. And this year it is Tainna by Norma Dunning, who is an academic here in Alberta, which is exciting. And this is a short story collection of Inuk people all around Canada, kind of like if you've read Nopaming, there are some characters spread across, and they are united in their indigeneity, in their sort of quietude, loneliness, and marginalization within Canada. And they manage to sometimes grapple onto a sense of selfhood and culture and strength in that, even as the world is sort of beating them down. Or not the world, but our specific culture here in Canada, and I'm sure in other places as well. This 6-story collection is pretty tight. I would say the prose are typical of what you would see in short stories, so it's fairly economical, sparse. I wouldn't say highly evocative, but pretty precise. I would say think of it as high contemporary writing rather than literary writing, if that makes sense to you. Every character, of course, is marginalized, and it varies quite widely as to what the central tension or conflict in each story is. It's a very fast-paced read. There is a glossary of terms in the back, so know that if you're seeing any words that you're unsure of, you can just turn back and there's a descriptor, but it is always very self-explanatory, I feel. Even more so going out of its way to accommodate white people, I would say. For instance, there'll be the word for fish, and then the grandfather will say fish after it, or in the same sentence, something like that. So it still feels organic, but not like, it doesn't feel pandering, but it still feels in the way that a lot of Indigenous fiction is moving away from catering to white people. This is still wanting to be accessible, and that might be because Inuk people are not so well represented in Canadian Indigenous CanLit publishing. I'm not sure, but either way I found it quite helpful, even though I would have looked up the terms just like I did in Nopaming and in some cases Nishka. There's an index, and I actually quite liked that there was an acknowledgement section before the stories even began. Usually you get that at the end, of course. It kind of peppers these stories in a way, because you kind of get the sense of personality in the acknowledgements for the author, and also maybe some intentionality around what the purpose of this is, and what it means to her and others, etc. I thought this collection was excellent. I didn't feel like any one story was particularly exceptional, but neither did I feel like any story was lagging or hindered by the collection either. It was a solid 4-star read for me. I really enjoyed it, and I actually prefer that it was a solid 4-star read rather than sort of mix the stories in order to elicit the specific feelings that those short stories tempt and rarely succeed for me. I think I've only read one short story collection, possibly 2, that I gave 5 stars. And even then I would say read these specific stories and not these others. So I think in a way this is a much harder thing to pull off, and I prefer it, as I said. So don't be put off by 4 stars out of 5. The thing that I liked about all of the characters the most is that they are for the most part simply living their lives. They don't seem to be performing their indigeneity for the reader. They are, as I said, wide range of conflicts. Some stories are longer than others. They get exactly as much time as they need and don't feel padded or particularly sparse in other regions. There's one story that I want to shine a light on very specifically, and it's one that even days later now, and I took a couple days to sort of digest this before recording it, whereas usually I would record it right after or shortly thereafter. There is a woman who is dispossessed. She's living on the streets, and a man who we shortly get the story of his grandfather passing and sort of what that means to him and what it was like as a boy in this community. I believe it's Edmonton for this story. There's a couple that take place in Edmonton, and that's where Norma is. I think she is at U of Alberta. And this guy who is similarly dispossessed, he moves from his community to Edmonton to work in the oil sands, which dries up for work-wise. He makes a ton of money, ends up on the streets regardless, and becomes particularly enamored with this one woman who seems to be able to call a dark entity, a dark spirit. And the way in which both characters are held to be accountable and culpable for their actions, and the nuance of the sort of morality play being taken place in the terms of probably what Western culture would ascribe as what is good and bad versus their own culture, and just sort of like how the stakes are so profound in the story, yet when you look at it from a Western perspective, they could be seen as very low. For instance, his goal overall basically is to get her to not buy alcohol and go and get to the restaurant that is particularly willing to give homeless people food, apparently. And she is constantly sort of thwarting his intentions, yet how is he in the right to keep asserting his own agency on her when it's her life? And then her reaction to his sort of unwelcome advances that are very borderline sexual assault stuff happening. And then also, just the repercussions and how that story ends has made me think about it in a very positive light, grappling with my own assertions and what the story is trying to tell me. If it is trying to tell me something, it is the perfect amount of like prescriptive versus subjectivity in a story. And I just highly recommend that you pick this up. And if you have, I would love to know what your thoughts on that particular chapter was, as well as all of the others. And if you liked this book, I would suggest also picking up Nishka by Jordan Abel, and also Nopaming by Leanne Simpson, I believe. And those three books coming out this year is very interesting to me. I think they're very much in dialogue with each other. It's very exciting to be following what Indigenous folks are producing, and I highly recommend that you do so. Leave your thoughts, comments, opinions in the comment section, and I will otherwise speak to you next video. Bye.